Can we all take a second and laugh at the Marine who put the MOBO in charge of facilities and the kids?
And then with a straight face looked at you and said, "This is going to be career broadening for you."
Yeah, it happens.
Limit.
And I gave him the crazy look. I'm like,
Oh man, brains of mush or balls of steel. I don't know which one it was.
He's probably a general at this point, right, Rich? I mean,
no. I think he's retired, actually.
Welcome to the Humorless Lot podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only. We do not represent the U.S. Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. government, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. As the hosts of this podcast, we also understand the risk we are undertaking by expressing our opinions, but we do so for the betterment of our 0402 community. If you have any concerns about anything you hear, please contact the producer listed in the podcast description. We hope you enjoy the show and that you'll look into our other community tools on Facebook, Discord, and Teams. Thanks for being here. Semper Fidelis. Welcome back to the Humorless Lot. This is episode 7, part 3 of our Marine Corps Mobility Officer series. If you haven't had an opportunity to go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2, please do so, as that will help set the stage for this part of the series. We joined the conversation in stream with Rich, Matt, Scott, and me. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you learn as much from it as I did conducting the interviews. Thank you again to Matt and Rich for taking the time out of their day to do this with us.
And 2 points to add to that, too, is that at the regimental level, UMCC works for the mobility officer typically. So that's your ground transportation. And so it makes sense that he's in the 4 or she, So the other piece, too, is so like at 3rd Marine Division specifically, it was challenging to get the 4 buy-in on why me as the mobility officer, I need to be there. And also the G4 ops planner needs to be there. Like 2 majors are gone. Well, yes, because I am a subject matter expertise in what I do. And while I do know logistics, I don't necessarily care about those other things or think about all of those things that the ops log person would actually think about. The ammo, I care about moving the ammo, but like, what's the ammo requirement? What's the facilities, the building, like all the other things, the contracts, all the other things that go involved with it that, yeah, I agree 100% that you should have both there in all the plannery things, because we focus on a particular lens and we can add input typically to those other lenses, but our primary responsibility is to make sure all the timelines, the inspections, the staging, all that stuff occurs, and also communicating that to the other units, where if the other units know that when I say something, if they challenge me, the G3 is just, or the S3 is just going to tell them to do exactly what I said, they're going to stop challenging. So that helps me. If the 4 says, hey, look, you need to do this, that's not the same weight as when the 3 buys in. So you're kind of a double agent, I think, as a mobility officer. You're kind of dabbling in both, but luckily it's for the same objective ultimately, as long as those personalities click. I'm sorry, Matt, you had to deal with that.
No, I learned a lot from you being up there at the MAG, right? Because different personalities going to deliver. I mean, different personalities can deliver the same results and just go about it differently. And though I know you and I didn't always see eye to eye on things, we both always focused on the mission, and that was a unifying effort. And then we'd go get beers afterwards. So I think that goes right into the relationship and personalities that we spoke about. Is the reoccurring theme, right? You and I could disagree professionally on things, or how to achieve the same results, and we'd have that debate. We talk about what's better, what would make it happen, and then we decide something, or even you as a MAG would say, hey, all right, hey, I'm trucking, but this is what the MAG is going to do. That's what you're going to do. And I say, all right, cool, copy. Hey, see you for beers at the O Club at 6. Hey, cool, see you there. And just get rid of the ego and focus. Like, what are we doing here? What am I getting worked about? Is to get this mission accomplished. Is it going to get it done? It's going to get it done. So, I mean, if we could focus on that and get rid of the personalities, who worries about who works for who, right? And I know that needs to be laid out somewhere, but I don't think that's something that's going to be the same for every job or for every type of unit and the level. For instance, I know I'm going to the MLG next, and the mobility officer and the UMCC all happen to fall into the 3 shop there. I'll have that experience to add onto the belt here soon. But if everybody focuses on mission accomplishment, it shouldn't worry about who writes your fit rep, where your desk is located, or if you have a parking spot or not. Are we going to get the job done? Is it going to be within the rules and regulations so that nobody goes to jail? And is the commander going to be happy because he's getting all his checks in the box?
Hey, I like my parking spot because I work such crazy hours. It sucks to leave for a meeting, come back and not have a spot.
Yeah,
The struggle is real.
here's what I just heard through that whole thing, because I got I got where it's just coming from. Put them in the 3 so they take up one of their spots on the PDSS, not one of yours. That way, it's like if they're like, "Hey, we can only take 4 people to the planning conference," like, well, the MobOs in the 3, so I guess it's gonna be.
That conversation does come up, and
Yep.
it's gotten to the point where, again, it is 100% personality based, but and your ability to articulate or explain. And sometimes people need to fail to realize what you're saying, and that's okay, because if you tell them and tell them and tell them and they don't listen, okay, and then when it fails, be like, hey man, this is why I was saying all these things, and like, yeah, you're right. So now everything that we do for state specific, we're executing Battle of Catan. Once that initial thing happened, every BK Planet event that we had ever since, the mobility and the G4 ops planner went, and I'm tied at the hip with both. I'm like the third person in the trio between the G3 planner, the G4 planner, and me, and we're driving the train, making sure timelines and everything else are planned for, considerations are planned for, and not forgotten or lost, because it will impact all of us. And all for not, the plan, Murphy has a vote. And so what is it? What's the saying? Every good plan.
No plan survives
BK's
first
wonderful.
contact.
That's what it is.
Yeah, but for the reserve, the SMO falls in the MFR G3, and like we're doing, and they're pretty critical. Like we're doing reserve ITX. I did it last year. I was considered the regimental mobility officer because Bobby Johnson just made me do all divisions work. So I did all no, he's amazing. He's one of my favorite human beings, and he's an amazing guy.
Like Bobby.
Yeah, I love him to death. But he taught me a ton, right? So I was doing the regimental mobility officer thing. And then now I'm as a battalion. But realistically, and reservists are going to hate that I say this, like the reserve ITX, it goes up to company live fire, which reservists do anyway, like at their home station. So ITX is kind of like not that cool. I guess they can do overhead fire or something stupid. I'm sure that doesn't cost $10 million. I'm sure they can get a waiver at another training base. But if you look at it from a strategic perspective, what does MFR really need to do? Like they don't have to be the best killers or the best engineers or the best logos. They do need to get there. Like when you're talking from the joint staff, is the Marine Forces Reserve ready? They need to be able to aggregate from all of their little houses and apartments all over the nation, aggregate to their HTCs, get to a deployable spot so that they can get received in the RSONI so they can further get deployed. So really, if you look at ITX, it's a mobility exercise. All the like live fire, shooting at pieces of paper that the grunts do during ITX, they could do that anywhere in the nation, except for the live fire overhead stuff. I don't know, whatever. Gunners could beat me up after this. But really, all a mobility officer exercise. So it's very interesting to see it from this perspective now and go, well, the main point is we got everybody here successfully and we got everybody back home successfully. And that's all driven by the SMO. It's all driven by the Bobby Johnsons of the world who are making that happen. It's pretty impressive stuff to see.
And that is a conversation that's happening at the joint staff level, mobilization of reserve forces and understanding how we aggregate combat power globally, right? It's being talked about actively.
I do have, looking at that little list that I had stuff I wanted to talk about was the collateral duties. So it doesn't always happen with 0402s being the boss. It does happen, say, at like artillery units, or, well, we no longer have tank battalions or tank companies, but specifically Arty, where, and perhaps it was a personality thing, and this is, I could see that possibly, but doing things, getting collateral duties like the safety officer or the facilities officer, which I've had that, or the camp services. So like specific to Camp Horno for 1st Marine Regiment out there, they have a phenomenal group of Marines who are either processing out or broken and can't do things. So they can't go on deployments or UDPs or anything. So they go back to camp services. Some of them are legal holds as well, but these Marines make that freaking camp work on a daily basis. They're the ones are cutting grass, building stuff. Phenomenal group of Marines. I, as a mobility officer, should not be responsible for them. Wonderful things, but I don't care. If you're short-staffed, understand, like, everyone's got to pay their fair share. But when you have other 0402s, junior 0402s, either lieutenants or other captains, don't employ your chief warrant officer that way, is my recommendation. Obviously, you're going to do what you want. You're the boss. However, why that's a horrible idea, and the use of, well, this is career broadening, is a bunch of bullshit, is because it truly is BS. Career broadening, by the time you become a mobility officer, most were either a staff NCO or at least a staff sergeant or a gunny. They have career broadening already just by nature of being a chief warrant officer. If it's something that truly is going to help, like I've had a job where I was a fit coordinator for a KO cell. That was actually very beneficial to me to understand how contracts are written for ground transportation, how money is processed, how all of that stuff works. That was invaluable to me as a mobility officer. So that one I appreciate. But the facilities piece, and there's other 0402s, I got it. They have the armory, they have the maintenance, the motor T. I mean, they have a lot of stuff as well, but that's in their wheelhouse. That's what they're supposed to learn and dabble in. So if at all possible, don't saturate your mobility officer with collateral stuff, because if they're a good mobility officer, they should be working strat mobexes. They should be working classes on how to properly mark containers, because we still have a problem with that. Updating their SOP because it hasn't been updated in 10 years. There's so many other things that we could be doing to make our unit moves far more efficient. That's what their focus should be on. By Title 10 law, that's exactly why they exist. By law, it states that we're not supposed to do anything outside of what we exist to do. Understand, Marines do a lot of things. I mentioned we're jacks of all trade. We do know a lot about a lot of stuff, but their primary focus should be mobility specific.
Can we all take a second and laugh at the Marine who put the MOBO in charge of facilities and the kids mowing lawns?
And then with a straight face looked at you and said, "This is going to be career broadening for you."
Yeah, it happens.
Limit.
And I gave him the crazy look. I'm like,
Oh man, brains a bush or balls of steel. I don't know which one it was.
He's probably a general at this point, right, Rich? I mean,
no. I think
Okay.
he's retired actually.
okay, all right, good. Sure, he's doing the best with what he had.
Two big things that I think I'd be remiss to not mention here. One, right, when it comes to deployment time, right, when that Red Star cluster gets fired off and they're like, hey, you need to deploy. Is your unit ready for that? And when that happens, even if you're ready, like your one or two embarkers are going to get run ragged. They should not be the guys building pallets, marking boxes, stuff like that, even though they're the guys that train for that. And I know this is where it gets confusing. Your embarkers are there to train what is called embark reps, embark representatives. Those are your folks down in the battalion, down in the platoons and down in the companies. That is not someone who works for the mobility officer or the log chief or anything like that, but that is the platoon or company's touch point to the embarkers, to the mobility officer, to the logo, to deploy that unit, right? And those guys, there's a program for it, and they're supposed to be appointed in writing and trained on how to do the very basic stuff, marking boxes, building pallets, putting in requests to move your stuff, properly packaging things. That's what they're there for. Because, right, when we're training for an exercise, we know that 6 months out, what do we always do? We task the embarker, hey, go inspect their shit. Go make sure their bags are packed. Go make sure that quad con is loaded. Make sure this truck is ordered, all that good stuff. And that's fine and dandy when you have 6 months to plan for it. When you have 48 to 72 hours to get out the door, your 1 or 2 embarkers have 1,000 things to do, and going and packing second platoons 18 7-cubes is not one of them. So please look within and say, do I have an embark rep program, and is it effective? Meaning, are we actually training those embark reps to help deploy this unit? And then the big thing that every mobility officer should be harping on, even though they're painful, Strat MOBEX. That's your strategic mobility exercise. That is an exercise whose sole goal is to say, how quickly and effectively can we deploy this unit if that red star cluster goes off? And everybody likes to think, oh yeah, we deploy to 29 palms all the time. We're super good at this. No, you're not, because it is inherently different from recalling everybody, packing up everything, and it all leaving at the same time, not falling in on gear or equipment on the other side. They are absolutely painful, don't get me wrong, but I promise the juice is worth the squeeze to do them. I think anybody that's done them will agree with those 2 facts. They're painful to execute, but the after action reports are gold. And your unit, from your CO to every company commander, your OPSO, your S4, everyone is going to agree at the end, like, wow, we learned a lot, and there's a lot of things we need to turn and adjust, because in the end, what are we all here to do? Right? Yeah, we're going to go do these exercises every year and this and that, but why do we do all that? What is everything we do? It all comes down to going and fighting that battle. And what are the Marines known for? Being the first ones on the ground. We're that shock troop. We are the government's ability to apply force anywhere in this world at a unbelievably short time frame in some points. And so we have to use these strategic mobility exercises to really gut check a unit to say, you're not as prepared as you think you are. And you'll see these TEEPs that are planned out, 2 to 3 years in advance, and there's no mobility exercise on there, because what do they always say? That's a 4-shop function. The 4-shop will just kind of do that internally and do a couple load plans and see what that looks like. No. Pretend to go load aircraft, recall people, put them on run them through the gambit of doing their medical, all that screening, everything needs to happen before they get on the aircraft. It is much more than we like to think it is when we have months to get this stuff ready. So please take the time, talk to your 3-shop, get a Strat MOBEX on the TEEP.
This is something that touches Matt, me, and you, because we did a Strat MOBEX. I don't know how satisfied you guys are with the Strat MOBEX that we did in Mag 12, but it is my one touch point on doing a Strat MOBEX. And I'm curious, in terms of interactions between people getting it on the TEEP, executing it and doing it, do you feel like that was successful? Were there things that we should look out for in terms of expecting to butt heads? That was at an aviation unit, right? And we did have a mission where we needed to be able to deploy quickly. Is there anything that stands out to you from execution of that specific Strat MOBEX that would be worth bringing up right now and talking through?
Yeah, if I could backtrack just for 2 other points really quick is,
Yep.
One, for the 0402s who were young, watch Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood, phenomenal movie. When Gunny Highway, they're out there, they recall everybody wearing his dress blues at a dinner, they get called away, and he's complaining about the fact that they have to fill out all these stupid forms while they're waiting to get out. That basically is an example of a Strat MOBEX where everybody arrived, they got accountability, and then it was all over. This was just a test. That's kind of like what a Strat MOBEX is. And then the other piece too is what Matt was talking about, is at the staff level, so regimental level, and honestly, even at the battalion level. This used to be inspectable, but every staff section should have a primary and alternate embarkation rep. every staff section to include a headquarters. If you're at a MSC level, the headquarters company or battalion, whatever is supporting you, whatever that supporting establishment is, they have embark reps as well. That's supposed to be codified on paper by unit from that command level. And all that training I mentioned earlier that the mobility officers are supposed to prepare, those primary and alternate reps are also supposed to be coming to that so they can learn how to do stuff. And you cover things like tactical markings, going over the SOP. This is how we're going to do things. And it ties into exactly what your point, Kevin, is was the juice worth the squeeze? What did we get out of it? Personally, yes, 100% was worth every single thing. And it took a lot of behind the scenes and arguments at my level trying to say this is exactly what we need to do in order to answer the question of how long will it take us to do X? And without going through all those things that are normally fairy dusted, which are logistical based things, movements, timelines, requesting, drawing ammo, drawing weapons, moving from this place to this place, processing people, manifesting people, getting everyone to the place they need to get when you have limited assets or resources. All of those things are a forcing function for the threes and the COs to be like, oh my goodness, I had no idea this is what it took to do all of this. Holy crap, we have a lot of work to do. That is your buy-in as a mobility person. That is your buy-in as a logo. And I still want to tell my story about the TEO and my first CO, but I conducted another strat MOBEX when I was at First Regiment, when we were part of the regimental landing team for the first med. We stood back up for the first time since OIF and OEF had kicked off. And I was able to convince my leadership that we needed to have a strat MOBEX that spanned 2 weeks. I developed a schedule, and RLT has 24 units under it, one of those being the headquarters. So I went between Camp Pendleton and 29 Palms. I inspected every single unit. I talked to every one of their fours. I provided all the packing lists, the SOPs, the HASDECs, the placards, how stuff was supposed to be done. I actually went and inspected it. We had 5th Marines units, same thing. They went to their UMA lot. That's where I met Aaron Corona, now Lieutenant Colonel Corona, amazing human being. He was an S4, never done anything at that point as a captain. That helped him see, holy crap, this is how this is supposed to go. Even to the nitnoid detail of packing lists and why those are important with inspections. And oh yeah, by the way, when you enter in a foreign country and you have to do a dip note for all of your cargo, having accurate UDL, not EDL, the UDL, the unit deployment list, it's a problem within 0402s and 0430s. And EDL is company level and below list of equipment, serialized equipment. A UDL, unit deployment list, is battalion and above, and that's what you actually deploy with. So hopefully we can quit being ignorant within our communities and actually say the proper term. But anyways, all of that stuff helps facilitate getting country clearances and not paying a lot of extra money and or the immigrations and customs and things. So all these little things that mobility folks hit on and embarkers are supposed to know, they all really do go for a larger purpose that most of the time at the using unit level, you'll never even see. You'll never even know that all these things are going on. But that's either real world deployments or even exercises like here at BK. We're doing dip notes for all of our ships that are coming in, and all that equipment has to be on there. Otherwise, all your stuff will get frustrated. It will never leave the port, and you will not have it for the exercise, and or it will be delayed going home, which could have larger impacts to the team. So yeah, stuff's important.
I got a couple. So I love the fact how you brought up, Rich, that you had higher headquarters involvement. The Strat MOBEX is like, I think it needs a rebranding. So here's my like business development side coming out, right? So like it just needs a rebranding for like tip fit validation, right? Because that's what you're doing. That's the value to the commanders. You're actually validating what he's putting on his tip fit. Now there's a lot of details like all the way down to the packing list, right? But it's you almost need to have the regimental, because you need to have regiment come down and inspect you. Because if you do it as a battalion, it's just not going, no matter how much your battalion commander loves you, he's got 1,000 things to do. And even if he's like the best guy who's like focused on it, it's just never going to get done unless you have somebody from higher going, hey, we're actually going to go through and do the packing list. Because as a 4, if your companies give you like 70% effort, then you'd be happy. You know what I mean? Like just 7%, just put something out there, like pretend to, whereas if it's a tip fit validation and the threes involved, and this is a operational level type exercise and they see it as such, if you brand as that, I think it would help the units out a lot. The other thing I want to call out a little bit is that, and maybe this will get some people to actually start doing it right, is the Marine Corps doesn't move as fast as we think we do. The 80s kick the shit out of us on any given day getting out the door, and they do. That's why they're first ones in Syria. They're sending armor out to Syria in 72 hours. Like, can we even get an infantry battalion out the door in 72 hours? I'm sure
so in their defense, they're right next to E-17s. That's where they're stationed. So it definitely helps them out.
I've just seen stuff where I'm like, man, we talk about being ready, but these guys are like legit. Like, I've seen some units, Army units, Air Force units that are like legit ready. And I really hope that we do get to the level that we claim we do. And I will say, in 3rd Marines, there's always like there's always a ready battalion, and we did get inspected by higher headquarters on our strap MOBEX capability, but it was almost a moot point. You'll know, Kevin, because you're leaving off island every couple months anyway. You're naturally doing strap MOBEXs like as just kind of steady state, because you're always off island, like you're always deploying off island. So make sure your tip fits tight. And the other point, to back up Matt on the embark reps. So in the soft community, the Green Berets have something called 18 Charlie. It's like their logistics. So you got operators, they're shooters, but it's a shooter that has, you could have a shooter that has like a medical person. So he's also like he's also like a medic, like an EMT, ambulance dude. He can sew you up. And you got a shooter who's like a sniper, and a shooter that all have their specialty skills. Well, they have a shooter that's called their 18 Charlie. That's their log person. So this is a 12-man team. So this is not a platoon. This is not a company. All we ask for is company reps in the Marine Corps. And where Berger wants to go with disaggregated forces and being able to be self-sufficient, it looks a lot like, I know we're trying to reinvent the wheel in the Marine Corps, but it looks a lot like how SOF does logistics. But I mean, we'll write a couple more papers and some more doctrine, and maybe eventually get to the point that somebody's already out there doing this. And their operators they're the ones who are building the pallets. They're submitting the TCMD. They're doing all the hazmats. They're doing all the dip notes. Some of them, the good teams, they're already hazmat qualified. So they actually sign off on our hazmat. And this is a 12-man team. So their embark reps are actually, deploying the way an 0431 would deploy an infantry battalion. And we really need to get to that point, especially if we want to accomplish what the boss wants us to do for FD 2030.
It's a struggle even out here trying to get people to understand that we're not as ready as we say we are, and as busy as we are, a lot of the times when we're doing those tip validations, even if it's just the paper level or plenary session levels, the problem is units are so busy that they will just give whatever they can give to feed the beast. What do we do for this last exercise? Submit that. No, you need to have your UDL and your UMD, your unit manning document. They need to match what capability is going and what they're tied. So these 7 people are tied to these 5 pieces of equipment, which equates to this capability set. That's the mentality that the operations side of the house needs to get to. So they're speaking the way that the TIFIT actually executes, which is supposed to be capabilities that we're flowing into wherever they need to go. And I agree. I prophesize all the time that we're great at making ourselves think that we're great. The Navy sells us a bag of goods as well, telling us that they're going to be able to support us. If we could go to a higher classification, I can tell you exactly how they cannot do what they say they do or will do, which is all part of the fight of trying to make sure that we have things like the law. Without the law, the MLR as conceptually designed will not exist. There is no other platform in existence that can provide the capability that the law program is supposed to give to MLR to be the mobility, maneuver, and sustainment of the assigned MLR. It's impossible. Like, I do this for a living. But it's frustrating because people don't want to hear the truth.
Let's talk CCO.
There's many levels to this, just like everything else we have in the Marine Corps. But I think for a lot of the logos out there, most of the time you're actually going to interact with them is either going to be at the ship or the Fibron level. And again, there's layers higher than that, but for the sake of brevity, we'll keep it low. So whose counterpart is who at the Fibron level? That's your amphibious squadron. This is the combat cargo officer, works for the Commodore, who kind of oversees all the combat cargo responsibilities over the ships that are assigned to that squadron, typically 3 and whatever makeup makes sense for that. His counterpart is generally the Muse mobility officer, right? Because a Muse going to leave out with his counterpart being the Fibron. Those are the two who's going to talk. And again, relationships. If those two are talking and working well, in theory, everything's going to go smooth. The landing plan is going to be executed via the ship-to-shore plan. The surface connector is going to be there. Everything's going to follow the timeline. For the time that I know a lot of the young logos, their first experience with a mobility officer is going to be when they are a TEO for a special purpose MAGTAF. So TEO is your team embarkation officer, and that's short for you're the guy who has to deal with all the things the mean CCO is going to tell you to do, and by the way, you're doing it wrong. That's just the way it is. It's a pickup game of basketball. You're going to have to learn as you go with all these special purpose MAGTAF. But that's who you're talking about. Now, the combat cargo officer, his responsibilities are on ship are different from his responsibilities as a mobility officer. So that combat cargo officer is really he's the green in support of blue in support of green, as we say, but that's the Marine who's responsible to the Navy for making sure the Marine things are taken care of. He's the one making sure that all the spaces that are used by the landing force on ship are well maintained, that they're ready to go, that they can embark anybody within 48 hours, as well as all the systems and the capabilities that ship is supposed to provide to a landing force. That's what he owes to the Marine side. To the blue side, he owes it to take the Marine requirements and translate that into what the Navy can provide and how they provide that. So you're talking the balls, which is the berthing assignment to shipping and workspaces. So there's what they call the space wars on the Navy side, because you have some sides that belong to the Marines, some side that belong to the Navy, and you have to figure out who's going to deal with what of those. And then ultimately it boils down to, for the ship CCO, getting the Marines to talk to the Navy. And if you are assigned TEO, or even if you're just a unit that's assigned to go on a special purpose MAGTAF, go hang out on a ship for a week. As soon as you are identified as ship, reach out to that combat cargo officer. Again, like I've said on other things on here, his job is to see you be successful. And the earlier you start that coordination, because again, branches of service, even though, right, we are a branch of, or we are a service under the Navy, we do still speak different languages. Our priorities are different. If you're a young logo, you're not going to go to a ship and just talk logistics with the what turns out to be the supply officer on a ship. You're going to start talking about different things, and he's going to look at you like you're crazy. There's things that a logo from the Marine side is going to need to go talk to the ship OPSO, go talk to the ship's supply officer, go talk to the engineering. There, it's a hodgepodge, not a hodgepodge, but it's a spider web of who you need to talk to get the same job done that you'd normally just talk to your other S4 counterpart on. Reach out to the CCO. He's not always going to be the guy to answer those questions, but he is going to make sure you talk to the right guy and get things set up. Get out to that ship, get your feet on the gangplank, walk around the ship, look at spaces, the sooner the better. If you know you're going to go out to the waterfront, but a ship has not been assigned to you yet, because believe it or not, ships like units have different levels of readiness. You may be told, hey, you're going to go out and do an exercise on an LPD. We just don't know which one yet. Don't get frustrated. This is the time when you reach out to, or go through your MEF, but they'll reach out to the ESG and they'll start answering some of those questions, the generic questions, to set you up for success. And as soon as the ship's identified, they'll let you know. What do you got to add on that there, Rich?
So just to add on, from my experiences, I started out, I did not do a ship CCO tour, which some people disagree with going to a Fibron. Again, I think it's personality based, because I think I did fine at the Fibron. Definitely the Mu interaction, definitely on par with the Fibron and the Mu. You'll hear terms like CATIF and CLIF, basically water, ocean, Navy, CATIF, CLIF, combined landing force. That's the Mu, more or less. Responsibilities change when you're at sea. So the reason why you have a Commodore is he's the adjudicating authority for everything, to include the Marines when they're embarked on ship. Once you start going ashore and you transfer authorities to now where the CATIF or the ships are supporting the forces ashore, the CLIF becomes the lead. And there's other hierarchy in the joint world that you will fall under. But the point is that oftentimes at the Fibron, especially in that initial meetings, working with the Mu, we're just meeting each other. There would be conversations or briefs of capabilities between the Navy and the Marine Corps side. I often found myself having to translate or explain, because the Mu would say something, the Navy guys were just like, oh yeah, that's cool. Even the Commodore, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, okay, gentlemen, just to make sure you're tracking, this is what they're saying. This is what they mean. Oh no, we can't do that. Right. That's why I want to make sure that you guys understand what's being said, because Matt's right. We absolutely do talk different languages, even though we're a naval service. We have different responsibilities and roles, to be honest. We're the infantry of the Navy as a Marine Corps. Like that's why we exist. So it's okay that we speak different languages, but as mentioned, the sooner that you can start making those relationships or fostering those relationships, the better. The communication aspects, there's also documents if you have to go on a ship, SLCPs, ship characteristic loading pamphlet. You can reach out to the Mu if you're supporting the Mu, or if you're going on a special purpose MAGTF or you get assigned to a ship. If you don't know that ship, you can go to the ESG as mentioned, and you can get those documents. Those products will tell you what your ship taxes are, how much people you have to give up for the mess lines on the enlisted side, what's required for the officer side, how many berthing spots do you have, where exactly those locations are, the space numbers on the ships, how many racks are in there, how many toilets are you supposed to have, all of those things, because when you embark on the ship, whether it's just for an exercise and or a deployment, you're going to have to inspect those spaces. So like your log chief typically would do that, walking through. You could have an officer do it as well, walking through the combat cargo team that's on that assigned ship. So knowing those documents, knowing what you're supposed to have, helps enable you to complete that inspection and make sure that Mu doesn't get charged for stuff that the ship just wants to put on you. Because unfortunately it does happen. Sometimes things were worn down on the previous deployment. They did not break until you were now on the ship, and then the bill goes to you. So again, making sure those inspections are done is really important. The other aspect that I wanted to talk about that I've mentioned a few times this evening is the TEO, the Team Embarkation Officer. I've seen 0402s. I've also seen 0302s get this job. And from the beginning, it's brutal. I personally have been up on them inside of them, chewing them out because they're not listening to what's being said. It's a fire hose effect for those young lieutenants. And the craziness of all of that is that by the end of that, so that's typically your first workups when you start embarking ship. By the time that deployment is done, that TEO, again, unless they suck, most of them don't, are freaking amazing. And they have learned a ton the importance of embarkation, knowing the status of your gear, knowing where gear is, the importance of a UDL, and importance of a ship load plan, how to update them, how to update SSDM with your data, how the inner workings of a ship work, because they truly are the bearer or brunt representation of that embarked force for that ship. And the example I wanted to talk about earlier is when I came home from Afghanistan in 2012, I had a new regimental commander, and I went and met him because my sergeant, bless his heart, had written a LOI for Strat MOBEX, and there were some errors and some incomplete things in there, and we didn't provide the correct examples for packing lists and things like that, that I wanted to make sure that if we're going to do it, we're going to do it the right way. So literally day one back from a deployment at work, I go and I meet the CO and I ask if I can pull the LOI back. I wanted to make a few adjustments and I'll bring it back for his signature. So we introduce, we meet, shake hands, whatever. I go back to my office, I start jamming away. About an hour or so later, he comes down into my office. It's late, it's after hours. And he surprised me because I had that weird feeling somebody standing behind me. I turn around and look and it's a CO. I'm like, oh crap, sir, you could have called me. I'll come up to you. He chuckled and he was sitting there telling me that this is really important. Embarkation is really important. And his mentor as a young lieutenant was an 0430 mobility officer. And it made him realize, that experience as a TO made him realize that he could have the best infantry company in the world. He could have the best infantry regiment in the world. Heck, he could have the best division in the world. But if he can't get to where he's going, he is worthless. He will never make it to the fight. He will never be able to do the things that they train to do as infantrymen and kill the enemy, which that resonated with me. And I've taken that with me to every other unit that I've ever gone to, is that mentality that if you can't get to where you're going, you're worthless. And I try to convey that to every CO, every CG, everything, is to get support for Strat MOBEX, to actually validate the tip fid that's there, to make units pack it all out, because it's not something that is typically exercised. And it is hard, it is challenging, especially when you have limited resources. You only have so many forks, you only have so many trucks, you only have so many serviceable quadcons. All of those things will impact a unit's ability to actually get out of town when it matters. So there's that. In terms of the CCO responsibilities, there's a lot of stuff that the Fibron side does. I could talk to ESG side. I could talk to, the gist is that the ESG counterpart is the med, and the Fibron counterpart is a MU. If you are being assigned a ship for an exercise, you should also be assigned to Fibron, who owns that ship, because they cycle through depending on what coast you're on, and where they are at in their readiness and their training. They will chop between Fibrons. So making sure you have the right Fibron is important. And those SLCPs, all the documents that you'll need to know, the low plan stuff, all the guidance that you will need in order to embark that ship and plan appropriately, you can get from that CCO at the Fibron. And they're more than willing to help out, from my experience.
Because this, honestly, just looking at it, this seems like a pretty overwhelming job. It's I don't know. It seems easy to make it simple to go, oh well, you're 0431, you're 0481. You did enlist, like now you're a MOBO, so you do CCO stuff. But now you're talking about translating words and capabilities that you don't know. Like there's no school for this. This is all OJT. Is there a certain like ramp up period, or what from like an 0402 perspective? Okay, I know I don't want to show my butt, so I'm going to make sure to read the SEL. I'm going to make sure to understand what I need to know to ask the right questions. Like, do you feel that, like Matt, like when you were 3 months in, you had it? When you were 6 months in, you had it? It just seems pretty a daunting task to walk into. It just wondering about that experience.
So I don't know if it's daunting by that point. Been around long enough, done enough things. I mean, Rich was my MAG mobility officer, so after that, everything is easy. But no, to get ready for the waterfront, there's the Combat Cargo Officer's Handbook. I read through that, and it's like any other pub, right? It's the information's there, but it tells you need to skin the cat, not how you skin the cat, that type of thing. So I read all that. I got to the ship, went through my ship's SLCP, became familiar with the folks, kind of lived on ship for a while. Matter of fact, I checked in, and 2 days later I went underway with no turnover from my predecessor.
Yeah.
I missed a couple meals because I got lost on the ship and didn't know how to get back, and I was too proud to pick up a phone and be like, help me, the one Marine on ship is lost. But not only become familiar with that, my ship had just finished a deployment. It came back. I made it my job to any LPD that was going underway to go do a little 2-week exercise. I went with them. Right. And I had young wife and kids at home. I didn't want to necessarily be gone all the time. But as I said before, you don't want the first time that you're in charge of doing something to be the first time you've actually done it. And so I learned going out with several different ships that all of them execute LCAC ops slightly differently. Everybody manifests folks to go on a helo deck in slightly different order or in a different location. All of them accomplishing the same thing, but they were all able to adjust. And so I recommend to other folks who are going out on the waterfront, do the same thing. If you can go jump on another ship for a week and go do that, or simply take a tour of a ship, see how it's going, by all means do that. There's also a course that was put together, and I actually got to help write the material for it. It's called the CCOIC indoctrination course, right? Combat Cargo Officers indoctrination course. It is not just for combat cargo officers. It's intended for the young 0402s who are assigned to a MU or assigned as a TEO for special purpose MAGTAF. All right, but the problem with a lot of special purpose MAGTAFs is you're assigned a little too late in the cycle to make time to go to a course. If your unit can afford to lose you for, I think it's only a week, if I recall correctly, just 5 days. If you haven't been, go to this course. Not only are you going to learn a lot, it's not like a paperwork intense course. They do a really good job of making it discussions, showing pretty pictures on the PowerPoint so you can see the big picture things. And more importantly, you will meet folks who have either been on the waterfront for a long time already and are simply there to give you their opinion, or new mobility officers that are going out there to be CCOs. Go there, meet these folks, talk to them, discuss with them. They'll have ship bosuns, they'll have OPSOs from the ships, they'll have SWOs, they'll have helicopter pilots. Because believe it or not, as young Lagos going on a ship, you need to care about them. You need to go introduce yourself to the helo officer, because he's going to help you do your pax mail cargo movement from ship to ship or ship to shore, vice versa. Highly recommend. I think it's a good use of a week. I don't say that about all courses that I'm forced to attend, but that one I will.
That course, I participated in 2 of them, and very much like this podcast, the collaboration aspect, just at the end of pretty much each day, they just have like a guided discussion, if you will, where people will ask questions to people who have already had some experience. And I think those are probably the most important aspect of it, because a lot of the CCOs and CCAs who do go, so that's combat cargo officer or combat cargo assistant, the staff NCO part of the combat cargo team, they talk about things that, man, I wish I would have been told this when I first checked in. So a lot of that is discussed. And I know I walked away with about 3 pages of notes, and I gave, because I talk too much, but I also want to share, about 2 pages worth of stuff from an OpNav, an ESG, a Fibron, a PPNO perspective on what the ships need to do and why the work that they do, the products they develop are so important. Kind of like we were talking about earlier, is people do read them and we use them. But yeah, it's a great course. Unfortunately, I wish it was mandatory that you had to take this course. But unfortunately, we're not in a position as a community or as a TCON to make this. It's a EWTG PAC driven course. They do satellite courses over at EWTG LANT. So you can go to the EWTG PAC website and get the schedule on when the next upcoming classes are. But if you have an opportunity to go, especially as a TEO, it's worth it. If you're a potential CCA or a CCO, you should go. And if nothing else, just for those guided discussions, they're worth the weight in gold.
Guys, great conversation. I hate to cut this short. I think we have a ton of stuff to be able to jump off of next time. truly appreciate you taking the time to sit down and reschedule to talk about this. I definitely will get at least one episode edited and put out before 0430. Yeah, well, it's perfect timing. I love it. So we'll get that edited up and I'll get that out to you guys.